We've heard from 4 excellent speakers, and to use more contemporary jargon, we started from RES 1.0, we then moved on to RES 1.5 with offshore parks and hybrid proposals. We also need to look at RES 2.0, a version that will include lots of energy storage, generation of synthetic fuel, hydrogen generation, e-mobility, and biofuels as alternative to power generation, waste, and what we heard in the beginning on artificial intelligence and modern technologies in connection to cybersecurity and the possibility to avert threats to our grids, our RES facilities, and our services from third parties. Why did I speak about RES 2.0? The climate is very favorable right now to reduce red tape, expedite procedures on time, but we need to look ahead because new technologies and technology as a whole will create new jobs for young people, young graduates who have brilliant ideas. Are there any questions among our distinguished participants for our panelists?
Μισό λεπτό για το μικρόφωνο για τη μετάφραση. Μια προβοκατόρικη ερώτηση.
A provocative question to investors in wind farms. The problem will become more serious over the years to come. What about obsolete wind turbines? How do you think this equipment will be managed? And what is the environmental footprint of obsolete wind generators, end-of-life cycle generators? And I would like to ask the organizers to do something next year about biomass. We've emphasized a lot on PVs and wind parks today, but I think that the greatest divergences between the targets set and the achievement has to do with biomass. Are there any more questions? Perhaps we'll take all questions now and then give our speakers an opportunity to answer.
I have a question regarding the presentation that you made, Alexandra, regarding the transportation of the electric vehicles policy. You brought about very nicely how quickly best practices can be adopted for you to many of them, and you showed a few countries. Now, I have had the opportunity to be involved in some of those countries. Can I ask you a question whether you would be open-minded to call it a electrification vehicle policy or a low-carbon vehicle policy? Because there's a lot more going on in the non-electric vehicle space. And why would you want to close your options around natural gas vehicles, for example?
Κάποια άλλη ερώτηση που υπήρχε.
Just a comment, particularly with regards to Mr. Handava's presentation, where you have compared the cost between conventional and renewable power generation and the so-called grid parity issue. As a power system engineer, I would like not to oversimplify things because we're not yet there. We're not yet there. There is an added component of cost in renewables, which is called system integration cost. And we have seen even in very mature markets like California, where we have a big penetration of renewables and the famous duck curve situation, where at the sunset you have huge system demands in terms of picking up land, that storage is still needing subsidies, tax subsidies and other incentives that the regulator in California gives, because it cannot compete. And in Europe, only in very few, again, markets with big penetration of renewables, like United Kingdom and Germany, energy storage in batteries is competitive only for very specific applications like fast frequency response. So we're not yet there. And there are costs. You cannot compare apples with pears yet. The grid parity is a kind of a fallacy at the moment. Still, we need to plan things carefully because there are costs involved, the system integration costs, when you have 60% levels of intermittent generation from a power system point of view. Okay?
Thank you. Υπάρχει κάτι άλλο για να απαντήσουν οι ομιλητές?
Questions for our panelists.
Ένας κύριος εκεί στο βάθος, νομίζω, έχει την τελευταία.
A gentleman at the back. This is the last question we'll take.
Καλησπέρα. Θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω.
Good evening. I'd like to know whether the government or the corporate world has any specific policy in the sector of geothermal energy. I haven't heard anything about that. We should have one, to be honest, and there will be one. But frankly speaking, for the past 2 months at the ministry, what monopolized our attention was our number one priority, was what we've kept discussing so far, the reform of PPC and a package of measures you've heard about from the minister. However, it is on our ministry's agenda. There is an institutional framework, as you very well know. What hasn't evolved in recent years is the use of geothermal fields through bids. We need to look into this and launch such processes. Geothermal fields are plentiful in Greece. We haven't worked on it so far, but we will definitely do so, is my answer.
I didn't get actually what you asked more specifically, but I know that you, for example, India, you have set a quite ambitious policy regarding your goals for electromobility. I know, for example, that in 2030 you plan to abolish actually the circulation of vehicles and shift to electric vehicles, if I'm right. So with that opportunity, what we have done so far in the ministry, but also while developing our plans for this policy, as I said in my speech, we are elaborating a concrete framework, taking the best practices from other countries. We know, for example, that Norway is far away. I don't know if Greece could ever reach, the targets of Norway. In Norway, 1 in 3 vehicles right now are electric. The charging stations are everywhere. However, currently in Greece we are in scratch, and we need to establish some more concrete measures in order to enhance electromobility. So that's why I said that we will initiate first the national plan, and we will follow afterwards with measures, tax measures and financial measures for the charging stations, but also for the electric vehicles. But I'm happy to exchange what you have done in India. I know that already you have taken a quite interesting number of measures in your government, so we can be in touch for that. Thank you.
Ναι, εγώ θα ήθελα να απαντήσω στον κύριο σε σχέση με τη διάρκεια ζωής των αναμογεννητρών.
You just answer to the question about the end-of-life cycle turbines based on current practice. What happens is that turbines can function for much longer than 20 years. We have cases when they are still functioning after 25 or 30 years, particularly when successful feasibility study for their installation has taken place. So turbines can be operational for much longer. There are safety issues, of course, and the need for certification. Or alternatively, turbines can be repowered, again following certification. And there's a third possibility of a radical replacement of a new technology turbine that will be capable of better utilizing the wind potential and generate more power.
Στις διαφορετικές αυτές περιπτώσεις θα υπάρχει προφανώς και διαφορετική τιμολόγηση.
Of course, depending on the case, the pricing for wind parks will be different.
Αναφέρονται στις μελέτες των περιβαλλοντικών επιπτώσεων.
All this is part of the environmental impact assessments, which include terms about end-of-life cycle and environmental terms and conditions. Instead of us being accused of leaving them unused, an investor that has a good location wishes to go on operating it and enhance the technology used. So wind turbines will continue being operational where they are located. So this is what you'll do. Exactly. Aged wind turbines, turbines whose contracts have expired, well, based on the legislation, they will also be represented on the market by means of the respective aggregators, including in the post-target model market and during the period of implementation of the target model. As you've heard, in addition to day-ahead market, it is important to make sure that they are part of the intraday and the balancing market. Therefore, based on what Socrates said, participation of expired contracts in the market leads us to the conclusion that this story is not over. I'm not talking about old vehicles that need to be withdrawn. And let me add, if I may, since you mentioned biomass and biogas, the shares may be too low compared to what we'd like to see. Nevertheless, the ministry, or the PEP for that matter, does not neglect this and always aims at developing all forms of renewables. Studies are being carried out for the inclusion of biogas in the natural gas network. There are such studies, there are innovative proposals, a global market and the Greek market is currently considering. With regard to the withdrawal of wind turbines, let me add this is a concern for us. We've developed certain methods in certain countries where permitted by law on recycling or reuse of part of the equipment. The aim always being near zero environmental footprint. In this regard, of course, we're not there yet. There are issues of concern for the scientific community and grid operators. So apparently there remains a lot to be done. On the other hand, I think it's a matter of time. Research into new storage solutions, depending on the country. We've seen a large part of our projects being accompanied with storage, even in the absence of specific incentives. This holds true in particular for contracts with corporate clients. So we're not there yet globally, but we think that we're on the right path. Could I add a point on repowering of wind turbines? The renewables, PPC Renewables, repowered 10 of its projects on islands. We carried out the civil engineering work and repowering of the existing infrastructure. A large part of the wind turbines that were removed became scrap. Other materials were sold on the secondary market. The foundations were sold to special waste management bodies following certification. So there has been no environmental impact. Instead of 5 or 10 wind turbines, we now have one or a couple of turbines. Therefore, the environmental impact is much smaller after the repowering. I think we've covered a broad range of issues pertaining to renewable energy sources. The giants are obviously wind parks and PV plants in Greece, ocean energy, hydro, geothermal resources, biomass, biofuels, also represent fields with a lot of investment opportunities. Before closing this session, let me point out that on the path towards reducing carbon footprint and low carbon economy, even the company I represent, Hellenic Petroleum, as our CEO said in the morning in his opening speech, are determined, just as all big corporations are in Europe, to move in this direction through our investments, and always bearing in mind social acceptance and our obligation to the generations to come. In the environmental sector and the sector of economy. These are investment opportunities that will help us improve the vision we'll share with next generations. Thank you to our participants, and we're looking forward to hearing from the Minister.